Welcome to Honeybee Watch Symposia series. This is the first public online event that we've done, and I can tell already that it's going to be a great success because 135 of you have signed up, and we have already 70 people who have signed in. I'm Steve Rogenstein. I'm your host, the behind-the-scenes producer, and also the project director of Honeybee Watch. And I'm joined here today by Rigo Moro, who is our science director. And today we're going to introduce you to Honeybee Watch, give a brief introduction, and then we're going to hear from 4 honeybee research pioneers. So today we're going to tackle protocols, specifically monitoring. And it's especially important when you're dealing with free-living nests. So imagine that you know where bees are living in a tree or in the side of your building or in a chimney. You have registered for Honeybee Watch, you've entered them in the site, you've uploaded photos, you've answered our preliminary questions, we validated it, published it, and then what? Up until now, not much has happened. However, we hope that that's going to change very soon. As we'll hear from our guests, this next stage after locating hives and colonies is to monitor them, to physically visit them and record certain data points. There are basic questions such as, is the nest still, is it active? Do you see pollen going in? Can you visit it at least 3 times a year? And beyond that, there are countless other data points, all of which are worthy of attention and some of which we'll discuss today. But when you're managing a citizen science research project, you have to balance between what you desire as a researcher and what's realistic to actually get and demand of or request of the people who are participating. So there's that fine balance, and it can be tricky. So I could go on and on and on, but we're really here to hear from our guests. So we have guests from Serbia, Ireland, the UK, and the US. Each of them will get 10 minutes, which is not a lot of time, to talk about their projects and to talk about monitoring. And now I'm going to introduce our guests. And what I love is that we're going to be going to Filipe now. And he is in a totally different setting. He is on a 3,000-acre property called Blenheim Palace. It's Europe's largest and oldest ancient oak woodlands. And there he has been, well, basically what happened is that they invited him to put hives on the property. And he said, before we do that, give me a couple of weeks and I'm going to see if there are any free living bees there already. And I think that within days or a week or something like this, he found a handful of them. And now a couple of years later, he's found 76 free living nests already on a small portion of their 3,000 acres. And what he's also doing is setting up a conservation perimeter of 12,000 acres. And now we're going to hear from him. And Filipe, are you there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Do you have a presentation?
I've got a little bit. My bandwidth is really bad. I'm at a regenerative farming festival, that I'm presenting at. So I've got my climbing kit. I'm just like I've got like bandwidth is really bad, and I'm camping. So yeah, let's give this a go.
I've seen you present before. You're captivating, so I have no doubt that you'll keep people's attention. So you've got 10 minutes. You want to start? Filipe, let's start you.
Okay, just let me know if my voice cracks or
I'll let you know.
Is that okay? Can you hear me fine?
Yes.
It's all okay?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So as Steve was saying, I was invited to go to Blenheim to have a look at the trees with the intent of putting beehives there. Now, my history with bees goes back, Paul Honningham is on here. He says I put people off. I scare people when I tell them that I've been working with bees for 50 years. It's coming up to 52 because I'm getting pretty old now. But it doesn't stop me from getting up into trees. But I think that experience is really, really important to share, because it's experience across at least 3 different continents with different subspecies of bees and different environments. War zones, rural areas, mountains, dense forests, etc. So finding the bees actually wasn't that difficult. What was interesting was where the bees were, and they tend to be at quite elevated heights, so anywhere from 10 to the highest one is now recorded at 32 meters. So I'm at the end of my rope. So these are quite extraordinary heights. So the nests tend to be in conglomerates of about 6 nests every 250 meters. My best nest aggregate was 2 nests in 1 oak tree. I've now found a 3rd nest in the same oak tree, which I think is the mother nest, or the established nest. So that, in terms of following a protocol, it just goes to show that we really need to be on top of how we monitor and where the flight lines are, and and just how in depth we are with monitoring these bees. Now, I do everything that Jovana and Grace have talked about. So I look at pollen coming in. I look at flight landings, departures per minute. I look at drones. The day checks that I carry out are wind, temperature, cloud covering, and then with climbing, I look at entrance measurement. I look at the cavity type, the volume estimate, which I use a wire method, which we use back in Africa. I look at propolis development around the entrance, and if I can, also on the comb. The reason for looking at propolis development on the comb is this is something that I believe is really intrinsic to honeybee health, and I find that the bees will, when they've got bigger entrances, they will use the front comb as a barrier to the outside, and they will inevitably close the entrance up to very, very, very small holes, quite a number of them. The most I've counted is 13 holes over a closure of an entrance. So they do close it. They do close the entrances up. So the interseason monitoring, I monitor all the colonies every 4 to 6 weeks. That's at the most, and 7 to 10 days during the winter and the spring. This is done on foot. If I don't see any flights on warmer days, I will climb the trees and blow into the entrances and put my ear there. I also use a stethoscope. That's from my physiology background, and have a listen. So our colony losses this year were about 14%. So all the colonies were recolonized by the middle of April, and I have not found any new colonies. So that is potentially suggesting there's a carrying capacity of the land that the bees are habituated to, which is something that we find with our African colonies, where when they exceed the carrying capacity of the land, they abscond and they travel over 200 kilometers. It's been recorded. They form swarm clusters, and these swarms can have 50, 80 queens, and they're massive swarms, and they just abscond. They eat the brood, and they leave the hive they leave the colony with everything, and they move to wherever there is rain or forage. So that's really important, because the honeybees here cannot, because of the Anthropocene, the built environment, they do not have the capacity to hop between the veteran trees, between the landscape, and so they are really limited to where they can move to, and to the capacity of where they are situated. So the intra-season, so during the season, exactly the same as Grace. I look at colony differences. Sometimes the colonies will be one flight per minute, even per 2 minutes. They are very difficult to see. I'll look at potential swarming activity to see if we can identify swarming. We are putting some monitors in to look at sound. I look at colony recolonization. So when nests are reoccupied, and we can see that we've got a very small window of when these colonies are re-inhabited. We've also seen that if we do discover new nests in August or September, that these tend to be, for some reason, late swarming. So these are heightened activity patterns in August or September. We look at the type of habitat that is available. This year has been extreme. We've seen a complete overlapping of forage. There's been no break whatsoever between forage. So the nests are absolutely full, and we've seen a lot of what people would call bearding, and even on cooler days when we would not expect the bees to do this. So water demand is something that I also look at. So we now have an edict at Blenheim where we do not use tracks, the cart tracks that have been formed over the winter. We don't drive on there because we know that even at 4 or 6 degrees, that water, there will be bees on them. So we now drive off the paths to protect the bees. But these are things that come up through observation. So really, that's what we're trying to do. We'll be looking at genetics. Obviously, everybody's very interested in that with Grace. But anybody that's been around bees for a long time will know that bees develop some succinct and very specific habituation. So things that they do that are specific, carried along the genetic line that allow them to survive in these environments, and they develop ecotypes. So we know Apis mellifera genetics are quite strong. There's good studies in the United States done with feral colonies, that show this, even though Apis mellifera were banned imports in about 1880 because of the F2 aggression. So that's where we are at the moment. I would say that this is a very, very much a collaborative work. I did have to travel one day to meet Joe Ibbotson, who's at Boughton, who's doing fantastic work there, because I had to believe that somebody else was doing some work there. This was in the days where I didn't really know a lot of people, Jonathan Powell, Matt Somerville, a lot of these people doing excellent work. And this is really is a work that needs to be collaborative. Jovana has mentioned it, Grace has mentioned it, I'll mention it again. I'm actually looking at a colony today that's in a nest that Matt Somerville put up at Groundswell. And I'll be reporting back to him. So this is about using experiences and skills that people have, and there's a lot of knowledge when we aggregate all our experiences, and this is absolutely invaluable. There's too much of people pulling one way and pulling the other, and after sort of self-interest. So it's, if we're going to look after the honeybee and look after very specific types of honeybee, forget forms. When we talk about my out apiary of swarm control, that's right near somebody else's apiary. All this should really stop. So I hope everybody has heard that, and that's about it. I think I'm on time.
You are perfectly on time. And
Okay.
we heard everything except for the very, very end where you broke up. So
I was just saying, how important it is that we share knowledge. Experiences accumulate to huge amounts of time, and this is probably the most important thing. Is that we need to share and bring knowledge together. By ourselves, we won't achieve very much at all. We become lone voices. And if we're going to save the honeybee as ecotypes, preserve the environment, we have to work together. That's it.
Just to notice that Felipe is not being paid by Honeybee Watch to say this, but this is exactly the purpose of Honeybee Watch, is to bring all these people together. And I like that you shouted out that Matt and Mick and Joe are doing all this great work. And I believe all of you, I saw two of you were here today. So thank you, Felipe. You're doing great work yourself. Thanks for sharing with all that.